Hi, boys and girls. Okay, so we are in the middle of learning about the three fires, right? And you have collected information about the Ojibwa. Today you're going to collect information about the Potawatomi tribe. But before that, I want to give you some information. I want you to think, how do we know how people lived long ago? How do we know how the Native Americans lived before any settlers were in this state or in this country? If no one was around, right? How do we know? Well, we really rely on archaeologists. And archaeologists are scientists who look into the past, much like when we were talking about fossils, and paleontologists dig up fossils and bones and other types of fossils, and they study animals from the past. Archaeologists dig up things that people use to study cultures from the past. So M231 is a highway in Michigan, okay? And they, while they were working on that highway, they started to notice some artifacts that they were digging up. So let's talk a little bit about that. So the Anishinaabe, and remember, those are the people who were here first, the Native Americans, which include all these tribes we're learning about. They traveled the waterways and they lived all over the state. And remember, we talked yesterday that they really traveled with the seasons. All right, so some of them lived along the Grand River. And here is a map of Michigan, and here is Grand River. And it runs from the west side of the state near Lake Michigan, all across the middle, and then kind of curves down a little bit. So if all of these tribes were finding out through our reading that they lived along lakes and rivers, mostly because they needed to fish and find wild rice, it would make sense that we might find some things that they had left behind. And we call those things artifacts. Things that people leave behind are called artifacts. And these might be some of the things that people would find as they dig up the ground. It looks like an arrowhead. Looks over here like a piece of shell, and they used shells as tools. Maybe another arrowhead. So let's keep looking. Here is a picture of archaeologists. Now, archaeologists, remember, they are the scientists that study things that people used and they left behind. And they do this by digging into our ground, much like the paleontologists did to find fossils. All right. So here is a picture of them, and they are digging and they are looking for artifacts that people left behind. Now, the river, that Grand River that I was telling you about that has this archaeological site, is actually 40 miles long. It runs from the west side of the state of Lake Michigan all the way through the Lansing area and then curves down a little bit. Now, this map shows the orange or yellowish, I don't know, they're kind of peach maybe boxes, is where they dug, where the archaeologists actually dug for artifacts along this river. Okay, so think about it. How do they dig into the past? Well, they dig and they study the things that people left behind. And that is what an archaeologist is, someone who studies things that people leave behind. All right, now you are going to be an archaeologist today. So you are going to get a piece of paper, and either you're going to have this with you or you can just use notebook paper. Pause, get some notebook paper and a pencil, and I want you to number down the side, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we are going to look at some artifacts that the archaeologists actually found, and we're going to see what we can find and how we can tell how people have lived in the past. Are you ready? Pause the video and come back when you're ready. All right. Number 1, we're going to go to this grassy patch, right? And we're going to start digging. So what types of things might you find if you just dig a little bit past that grass? Well, let's see. I found a toy car and an earring. A toy car and earring. Why don't you put that in layer 1? So write that in on your sheet next to layer 1. A toy car and an earring. Pause the video and write your answers. Okay, the next one, welcome back, boys and girls. If we dug a little bit deeper, some things we might find we might find a piece of record. That black thing is a record. It's used to play music. We might find a bottle cap or a button. And then over here is some sand. You might find some sand or some different soil. Why don't you write those down in layer 2? A broken record, a bottle cap, a button, and different type of sand. Pause the video and come back when you're ready. All right. So just think about it. Those records used to go right on record players, and you would put a little needle down on the record player and music would come out. Now we just download it on our phone. And bottle caps we used to have on glass soda pop bottles. They weren't plastic. Now we have plastic with screw-on caps, right? So that is what you found in layer 2. All right, if we kept digging, we might find something else. What do you see in this picture? Yeah, we see a horseshoe. It looks like a horseshoe. Maybe a broken piece of pottery. And a button. And that button looks very different than the other one. The other button was pink and it was plastic. This one looks to be maybe wood or stone. So pause the video and you're going to write that in layer 3. A horseshoe, so a piece of broken ceramic, and a button. All right, now look at that, a piece of broken ceramic. If you dug long enough, you might find multiple pieces and you could glue them together. It kind of reminds me of the paleontologists. They keep digging for more and more bones, and eventually they may be able to put a whole dinosaur together. Well, archaeologists do the same thing. If you found a piece of broken pottery, you might keep digging to see if you could find the rest of it. That way we could see what type of utensil or bowl or pot people were using back then. And this one is actually stamped, so they could probably date it. Right? Okay, let's keep digging, boys and girls. We dug down one more layer, and what did we find? It looks to be an arrowhead. So I want you to pause in layer 4, write down arrowhead. So all those layers that we kept digging in, and the archaeologists kept digging in, we kept finding more and more things. And all of those things were used by people. All right, all of them were used by people, and we found some sand. The sand might tell us a little bit about the environment. So I want you to think about that. Look at your sheet, right? Look at your sheet. We have a layer of grass. If we dug down, we found an earring and a toy car. Those may be things that we have used in the last 10 years. All right. And then you dig down a little bit further, and someone dropped a bottle cap and a record. We found pieces of those. Those would date back almost 70 years. Maybe a little less, but about 70 years. And then if you keep digging, you find a horseshoe and some pottery. You're going back 170 years. And then the arrowhead is 700 years ago. So archaeologists use these things, and they decide how old they are by how far down in the dirt they find them. And they try to piece together how people lived long ago. So it's kind of like a puzzle, like putting a puzzle together to try to find out how people lived and how they used things, right? And so that is what the archaeologists did. They went all along Grand River here, and they dug and they found things that people used, and they found quite a few Native American artifacts. They found, and that is how we know that the Native Americans of long ago, that is how we know how they lived and what they did. And you can see a nice map of Michigan here. And here's another highway in orange. They may have dug a little bit along that highway too. That looks like a path that the Native Americans may take. And there's a picture of Grand River now. Now we have a bridge going across Grand River. How do you think the Native Americans got across that river? right? Probably by a canoe, right? However, we put up a bridge. All right, boys and girls, and now some of those paths, we have cars. So along that river, we now have Grand River Avenue that runs, and a lot of our paths are paths that were taken by the Native Americans, and now we drive on them. But think about it, long ago, how would the Native Americans get back and forth? Yeah, they were probably walking, right? They were walking and using their feet or using canoes and going down the river for travel. All right, there's some more maps of the river. And there's a picture of the bridge. That's how we get across today. And that's about it, boys and girls. All right, so that is what archaeologists do. They find things. I'm going to go back up to that picture of those artifacts. They find things that people used long ago, and that is how we find out how people survived and what they did and what their culture was like. It's very interesting, kind of a puzzle that they have to put together. All right, so boys and girls, you are going to learn about the Potawatomi today and about what they did and what they ate and the homes they lived in and the things that they made. So go through and make sure you watch the next video so you can know how to highlight to gather that information on your data sheet. All right?